So I'm here sipping my filtered ice water, clearly ice water. I've got a mixture of both crushed ice and cubed ice. Ooh, your tepid tap water.
I am sipping tepid tap water, but it's out of a glass straw. So, as my sister told me, it's very influencer-like.
Oh, really? Are glass straws a thing now?
Apparently. I just bought it at a brewery because I thought it was cute.
Oh, okay. I prefer stainless steel straws. They add a slight metallic taste.
Mm-hmm.
So, a lot of things affect the taste of water.
It's true. It's true. A lot of things affect the taste of beverages. I mean, that's like when you drink beer out of a bottle versus out of a can.
Yes.
I prefer a bottle, not gonna lie.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
I mean,
most things
I'm okay.
Right, but... Well, yes, but yeah, if you're forced to choose a container, typically I would prefer a bottle.
Speaking of liquor, though, I have an update.
Oh, yes, tell me.
Yes, so my brother lives in Pennsylvania, and he just sent me this update that I feel like we need to share with our listeners. If you haven't listened to about liquor laws, you can go back and listen to that episode. But if you did listen, then you know that Pennsylvania has some of the most confusing liquor laws in the sense that there's just like very specific rules for every single thing. And what is happening right now in Pennsylvania is that canned cocktails, so again, a very specific thing, but canned cocktails were not allowed to be sold in Pennsylvania restaurants and gas stations. Okay. However, a new bill just got signed so that now restaurants, grocery stores, convenience stores, gas stations will be able to sell canned cocktails.
Ooh, how exciting.
I know. It doesn't go into effect for 60 days, but okay. Because previously you could only get canned cocktails at the state-run fine wine and good spirits locations.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes. But, well, yeah.
So they're letting go of those.
Mm-hmm. And what is considered a canned cocktail? High noons are considered a canned cocktail.
I was going to ask you because they have actual, like they're a seltzer, but they're not, right?
Mm-hmm. Because they're like a vodka.
They have real vodka instead of like a malt beverage that's.
Yeah. So it's not just like those little, craft, whatever, Manhattan or something cooler things like High Noons and Surfsides and other things like that.
Well, good for Pennsylvania. I'm really happy
update
for you that you can now buy a High Noon in the gas station. Hi, I'm Katie.
And I'm Emily.
We're two long-distance best friends with a passion for learning about all the things that make everyday life interesting.
We'll share our findings with you on researching the obvious. So I know we already did a beverage episode about liquor, but now we're going to do another beverage episode about water.
Which is, I learned, the most popular beverage in the United States. So I don't know what popular means. I mean, like, everybody kind of has to drink water, right? So
yeah, it's just also the most widely sold, right? Like,
yes, right.
In general,
well, yeah, and I guess bottled waters, yes. Yeah. We're talking about bottled water specifically, is a popular beverage in the U.S.
Yes. I will say, though, I feel like kids these days walk around with their giant water bottles and, constantly drinking water. And I feel that when I was a child in the 90s, no one drank water.
No, we did not. And do you know what we did? I mean, we drank water via Kool-Aid. Correct. Or via Crystal Light.
Iced tea.
Yes, iced tea. And Nalgene, like reusable bottles, did gain some traction.
That was like college.
That was more like, I was going to say mid-2000s for that, or like early 2000s for that. But before that, no way. There's no way I carried a water bottle around or like tried to drink water or like thought that it was important.
Not a beverage that I drank as a child.
Yeah, no, me either.
It's
Lots of milk, though.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Maybe we need to do an episode on milk as well. So that's something we've talked about.
It's the most adult beverage, water. It is.
Yes.
How do you know you're an adult? When you drink water exclusively.
Yeah.
Anyway, now that I'm older and hopefully wiser, I drink more water. And I feel like you and I have been talking about bottled water specifically for quite a while.
Yes, because
we generally do with all these topics.
Yes, right, with these topics. But in particular, because I don't generally buy bottled water. It kind of seems like a waste to me. It's not something like we keep in the house. But when I travel, a lot of times I would rather just get a bottle of water at the airport, and then I keep the bottle and I like reuse it for that trip or whatever. I try to do that. I'm trying to be a little bit more responsible about that. But that is one of the times I would say for a road trip or in the airport, I will pick up a bottle of water just out of convenience.
And I know when we would visit each other, like if we flew to see each other or something like that, we would buy a bottle of water in the airport and then we would comment on each other's
which
choice.
Water we chose. Yes.
Yeah.
What is your choice?
I was going to say, because I have specific water, like if I'm going to buy a bottle of water, which doesn't frequently happen, either it's carbonated water, which is a whole other situation, because I prefer the fizzy. Yes. But if I'm just buying a plain bottle of water in an airport or something, I usually go for Fiji. I'm just bougie like that.
Me too. That's my favorite as well. And I always like cringe at the price. And I'm always like, oh my God, like I'm going to be that person carrying a Fiji bottle through the airport. But it tastes superior. I swear.
Yeah. I also, as a geographer, find the marketing and packaging of Fiji
very pleasant.
Water.
Very pleasant.
I find it to be hilarious.
Oh, really? I find it very appealing. It makes me feel calm.
Find it hilarious. They always have these like descriptions on the back that are scientifically questionable at best.
Oh, really?
And yeah, they talk about like this natural water coming in through purified aquifers untouched by human hands.
Oh, yes, I have read that before.
Not how the water cycle works. It's not how it works. So
yeah, I've definitely read that before, but...
Yeah, I mostly pick it up just to laugh. Get a good laugh.
Yeah.
It tastes the best.
It does. It tastes the best. But then also, there have definitely been a few times where if I'm feeling like I need to be more economically responsible, then my next choice would be Ice Mountain. And I do remember telling you this because I was just like, oh yeah, Ice Mountain's also good because it's also spring water, but it's just cheaper. And you were like, we don't have Ice Mountain. I'm like, what do you mean? Like that?
Yeah.
Doesn't, like, that's the bottled water that everyone has, right? And I think it might have been when I was visiting you or something, but you had Deer Park water, perhaps, or something like that. And I'm like, the bottle looks exactly the same. Why is it called something different? And that is when we discovered that Nestle, well, not anymore, but at the time, Nestle owned multiple brands of water bottled in different areas of the United States, and then they just slap a different label on it for those different regions, which I thought was fascinating.
Yeah, we went down this whole rabbit hole about how there's regional variants of bottled water. We will get into why that is a little bit later in the discussion, because they're not actually the same water.
Correct.
Despite all being owned by Nestle. But yeah, and we have a good map too to show you.
Yes. But the other important thing that I learned at that time is that despite them all being branded differently or sourced from different places, they were all spring water. And so then that also spurred the discussion of the spring water versus what's just your regular old purified water.
Yes. A big distinction, actually.
Yeah.
I wanted to know the distinction of that. And so I found a website from University of Nebraska, Lincoln. They have a big water resource center, largely because they're a farming state, and so a lot of people are digging their own wells and things to provide water, and so they want to make sure that their cooperative extension has resources for people to have safe water. But on that website, they explain the difference between tap water, purified water, and spring water. And so obviously tap water is the water that's gonna, in the United States, come out of your faucet. It's being supplied by your municipality. Tax dollars go into supplying that water for you, and the government is regulating the safety and purification of that water. It's going through lots of filtering and stuff like that to make sure that it's clean when it's coming into your home. Bottled water is usually either purified water or spring water. Purified water is filtered water. So it's just water.
The same. Municipal sources.
Yep. Water from a reservoir, from filtered. Some sort of water tank source that's being purified. And maybe the company that's selling it is purifying it a little bit
more, or removing different things.
Or they're purifying it using a different method. Instead of a charcoal filter, maybe they're doing a distillation
or reverse osmosis or something like that.
Exactly. But it's coming from a water source that is on the surface of the earth. So a lake, a river, a reservoir, something like that that's on the surface of the earth. Spring water is water that's coming from underneath the earth. So it's coming from a groundwater source. And because it's buried in the ground and it's running through limestone or volcanic rock or something like that, it's getting purified and safe to drink through a natural process of literally running through the rocks and stuff in the earth. And then it's being removed directly from the earth and put right into a bottle. So it's not being treated in an additional way. Obviously, the EPA and other inspectors are inspecting the source of the water.
Spring water. Yep.
Yeah, to make sure that it's safe to drink, but there's no additional
purification
process. Purification process. Yeah, it's just a natural source.
Side note, that's why Kentucky and Tennessee make the best bourbon and whiskey, because they have so much limestone in that area. The water is just naturally very, very filtered and is perfect for creating liquor, distilled beverages. Yes. So that's actually one of the reasons why the bourbon industry kind of took off in Kentucky way back when, is because they just had naturally available, very, very clean, filtered water that made really good tasting spirits.
Huh.
Yeah.
I did not realize that was
I learned it on a distillery tour.
Nice.
Yes.
I mean, supposedly that's why the best bagels and stuff come from New York City, is because of the water.
Oh, because of the water. Yeah, I've heard that too.
Yeah, the type of water that they have.
Yeah. It can affect a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
And I do prefer spring water. Like I said, I would much rather have an ice mountain than a Dasani. And anyone can fight me on this, but I hate Dasani. I think it tastes so gross. It's
Dasani is
hands
disgusting.
down the worst bottled water. Yes. I don't know what they do to it, but I know they add salt, so I always feel like it has a salty aftertaste, which I think is gross. Why do you want to taste salt in your water? I guess some people do, because some people like it, but I don't know. Yeah. I'm not going on a road trip or in an airport and buying a bottle of Dasani, because that is a true waste of money, in my opinion.
Yep. No, if the option is to take a literal bottle of free Dasani that someone is giving me, or drink out of the public water fountain, I'm just going to drink out of the public water fountain for sure.
Yeah. Yep. I agree.
Yep. I agree. Because it tastes bad, and we don't need that plastic. No.
Yeah.
Especially because it's literally just purified water. It's not really much different from what's coming out of your tap. So there's these different types of water. There's your tap water, there's your purified, filtered bottled water, and then there's your spring water that's also in a bottle. Why did we start bottling all of this water? Like, when did that happen? Yeah.
How did we get to the age of Dasani? Really?
Exactly. Okay. That's what I want to know. Like, who was sitting around being like, hey, let's just take tap water and bottle it and sell it? How did this whole industry even start?
I read a brief history of bottled water, an article on The Kitchen, which is one of my favorite cooking websites, and I'll link that. But I was shocked to learn that bottled water has actually been around since the 1600s. They started bottling spring water, obviously glass bottles too, not plastic bottles. But they started bottling natural spring waters and then kind of believed that it had therapeutic and health benefits. And so that was like the draw to originally start buying that. That's the earliest kind of record of
also in the 1600s, it was hard to find
potable water.
Like safe potable water too, right?
Yes.
Like a lot of times water would be contaminated. And so if you lived near one of these natural springs where the water is coming out of the earth naturally filtered and purified,
right,
you could get that safe source, but not everyone lived near these springs. So I didn't realize it was that old in the 1600s, but it makes sense that someone thought, hey, I want to be able to take this healthy water, because at the time it was definitely healthier than other waters, and have it with me in other places. The other thing I thought was kind of cool is some naturally occurring spring waters have fizziness in it. So if your spring is going through volcanic rock, some of the gases that are released from the volcanic rock will naturally carbonate the spring water. So
nature's carbonation.
Yeah. So in 1783, this guy, Joseph Schweppes, which that sounds familiar, he figured out a way to create bottled carbonated water to mimic the like naturally occurring fizzy mineral water that you would get from a spring. He started the Schweppes company to make artificial spring water, is what they called it originally, because it was like this carbonated water. I didn't realize it was that old, 1783.
Yes, and I also read, and we'll get back to some of the other water brands later, but in the U.S., one of the first major bottled waters was Poland Springs, which is a spring in Maine, and they started selling bottled water from their spring in 1845. So also pretty old in the U.S. too.
Yeah. It never like occurred to me that bottled water had such a long history.
Right.
But when you think about it in the context of spring water and that being literally healthier, and then it being sold for its health benefits as like a health option in, the 1800s, it actually makes a lot of sense.
I know, it just never occurred to me either, because I just think of bottled water as like the stupid blue plastic Dasani bottles.
I even read that back in the 1800s, you could buy bottled water in like saloons, even would offer it as an option, because it was sort of that novelty a little bit to be able to get a spring water, right? Or like pharmacies sold it as like a health cure and things like that.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Then bottled water declined, though. It was really popular in the 1800s, but then it declined because in the early 1900s, we developed technology that allowed for us to clean municipal water sources. And so starting in the early 1900s, municipal water became potable and clean and healthy. And so people were thinking, well, I don't need to buy this bottled water then anymore, because the water that's coming from my house or the local well or the local tap, whatever, is clean and fine to drink. So I don't have to spend my money buying water. And so bottled water became really more of like a status and luxury thing because you were importing it from a spring, because basically all bottled water at that time was the natural spring water that was seen to have this health benefit and things like that. And so people just really stopped buying bottled water. Some numbers that I think are interesting that we'll want to keep track of. In the 1970s in the US, only 350 million gallons of bottled water were sold.
Right.
So it sounds like a lot, but realistically,
it's not. It
was only about 1 gallon per person per year, right? So it's really not that much bottled water. And most of the bottled water that was being sold in the 1970s were those big 5-gallon jugs that you'd see in like an office water situation.
Yep.
In the 1970s, it was just 350 million gallons a year.
And they were still using glass at that time too. So you might have some more expensive waters that were glass bottled. Okay, so 350 million gallons of bottled water in the 70s.
Yes.
Fast forward to 2013, over 10 billion gallons of water are now being sold in the US.
Yeah. So basically from the 1970s, we went to a third of a billion to 10 billion in 2013.
So really exploded with the help of plastic.
Yes.
And some other things too.
Plastic made it easier and cheaper to ship bottled water around, but some other stuff happened, and it was mainly in the 1990s, when we started seeing in the US the explosion of people consuming bottled water. I think it's important to caveat that we're talking about the United States in this discussion because other countries do drink a lot of bottled water, but they don't have the same access to fresh, clean water that the United States does, right? So, you know, if you're going on vacation to, like, I just went to the Dominican Republic, you should drink bottled water because the sources of water are not going to be as safe. So in the US, despite having access to safe water that actually caused a decline for a long time of drinking bottled water, in the 1990s, the bottled water industry really ramped up in terms of sales. And it was because, one, of plastic made it easier and cheaper to manufacture. But two, there were a couple health scares that happened in the 90s regarding municipal water supplies. There was a huge one in Milwaukee that caused several deaths and things. And so people were a little bit concerned, understandably, about their tap water. But what happened as a result of that scare was that bottled water companies just played on people's fears to get them to start purchasing bottled water and not relying on the tap water.
What a novel idea.
I know, right? So it was literally fear tactics that some of these bottled water companies started using in the 1990s
marketing
to purchase bottled water over tap water, saying that it is healthy. And I think something that's important to note here is this is when we see the beginning of bottled purified water, not spring water. Right. So spring water, right, we know existed for a long time since the 1600s. In the early 1990s is when bottled purified water started to be for sale. Aquafina, that's the big one that Pepsi owns. That started in 1994, and they started actively marketing it in commercials in 1998. And Dasani, which we already talked about, owned by Coca-Cola, that one started in 1999. And so these bottled purified waters started in the 90s and really were just pushed on consumers as a healthier and safer option than drinking your tap water. I used to teach economic geography. I'm an economic geographer by training. And so there's an article that I used to have my students read called Constructing Purity, Bottled Water, and the Commodification of Nature by Andy Opel. And he talks about this sort of dichotomy that exists where the US government is supplying water to your homes and setting the standards for what quality of water you can get in your house. And then industry is literally using that same water, putting it into bottles, and then making you afraid of that water that's coming out of your tap, which is the same water that they're using to then sell you out of a bottle. So you're literally paying for this water that's
potable
coming
water
to your house, as well as to these bottled water plants, then they're putting into a bottle and reselling back to you
as a bargain too, because like the purified waters are the cheaper ones, so I feel like that's a lot of times why people might grab them.
So I want to share this quote from that Opel article because I think it's a good quote. But he says, although the government supplies the water in some cases and sets the standards for the water in all cases, the industry uses public fears about public water while profiting from the protections they serve to undermine. The public investment in clean public water becomes a private resource for the bottlers.
Yeah, that's funny.
Like, what is that about?
Yes, and I will admit, okay, so I live in Indianapolis. The water here is very hard. Okay, so it wreaks havoc on your pipes, your showers, and it doesn't taste great because it's hard. And so, like, water companies around here, like water purification systems are a big business, water softeners and things like that. And so we did end up buying like a reverse osmosis system to make our water taste better and to use for cooking and stuff. But I did not realize until we were doing this research that it's not that the water here is bad to drink. It just kind of tastes bad. Because when they come in to sell you these purification systems, they hit you with all of these, like, we can do a water test and tell you everything that's in your water and blah, blah, blah. And they give you this long list of like minerals and metals and blah, blah, blah. And they very much make it sound like it's bad to drink, right? They don't really come in saying like, well, of course your water's safe because there's, national regulations and state regulations that monitor the quality of your drinking water. They're just like, no, look at all this crap in your water. You need our purification system. And I kind of bought into that. I kind of thought our water was not good to drink. And it turns out it's just, it doesn't taste good. It's not, it's just not the greatest, but it's literally fine. And here I was thinking
I'll be honest, I didn't realize that either. I didn't realize that we're being sold our own water back to us.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is not to say that like taste doesn't matter, because it does, right? Like taste is important. And as I drink my tepid tap water, as you always point out to me, Katie, I will admit that there have been some places that I have lived that I did not like the taste of the tap water. And so I'd use like a Brita filter. Like when I lived in Oklahoma, when I lived in Washington, D.C., I didn't really like the taste of the water in those places. And so I'd use a filter for those. But other places I've lived, Ohio,
tastes
here in Maryland, to me, they're fine. And so I just drank it from the tap.
Yeah. So here I am. I was a little bit duped by their fear tactics, because that's exactly what it is like, let us show you all of these, like, things that are in your water. They're all safe levels of these things, but they make it seem like it's not.
I find it interesting that you have this explosion bottled water consumption in the United States, and a large portion of it is purified water.
Yeah. And do you remember when the flavored waters got really big?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like what was the...
Propel?
Yeah.
Propel.
Propel.
They just take, right, tap water, essentially, do some purification, and then they add some artificial flavoring, and people went nuts.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then like now I feel like those like Mio drops and stuff, you can get those to just like flavor your own tap water. Because, you know, we still want Kool-Aid since that's what we drank as children. And so all we want is flavored water forever.
Yes. Artificially flavored.
Yeah, exactly. That's all we want all the time.
Talking about taste, right? And I think we kind of touched on this before, but when we were talking about taste, that to me is where spring water is superior. Like there is a definite difference in the taste of a bottle of Fiji water or a bottle of Ice Mountain and a bottle of Dasani or Aquafina or Smart Water or whatever. Start checking your labels, people, so you know what you're buying.
That's like the key thing to note is that despite the explosion of bottled water and people purchasing largely purified water, spring water is legitimately different in terms of the composition, right? Because like we talked about at the beginning of the episode, spring water is coming straight from the ground through limestone or volcanic rock or whatever, becoming safe for humans to drink that way, as opposed to through a man-made purification process, purification system.
So it has different minerals, it has a different pH, depending on where it comes from. It can have all sorts of different stuff in it. That's, I mean, safe to drink, but depending on where it's being sold.
Yeah, exactly. And it really just has to do with the geology, right? So different areas of the world have different rock systems that are existing under the surface of the earth. And so when you're pulling water from under the surface of the earth, you're getting just traces of those minerals and stuff that are existing in those different rock systems, which is why if we go back to this discussion of all the waters that we noticed were available, you know, Ice Mountain versus Deer Park versus Ozarka, these different waters, they're literally tasting different because they're being sourced from different springs.
Right. So yeah, I was looking at that map of the different Nestle brands. Well, they used to be Nestle brands. Nestle recently sold them to a brand called Blue Triton. So someone else runs them now. But so we already talked about Poland Springs, right? Which we would always see at school because that's a very New England one. And it actually comes from Poland Springs in Maine. Like it's one place. And then Ozarka, you mentioned, which I think you had out in Oklahoma, right? Did you have Ozarka out in Oklahoma?
In Oklahoma and Kansas, we had Ozarka.
Yes. So that comes from several different springs in Texas. So you see that one more in like central south United States. Ice Mountain, which is the one that I always buy when I'm traveling in the Midwest, comes mostly from Michigan, but a few different places in like Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania. So they have multiple springs across the Midwest that they source from for Ice Mountain. And then when you get further to the east, but not up into New England, you have Deer Park. And that one is sourced from actually South Carolina. And then there's Arrowhead, which would be California and Colorado. So like way further west. And then Florida has Zephyr Hills. I don't know why. Like Florida's the only one with Zephyr Hills. I don't know why. But it comes from 6 different springs in Florida, and that's the only one.
So because these springs are all located in these different areas of the country, they're going to have different
taste,
geology, and they're going to taste different. So when you're drinking a spring water out of a bottle, you're getting all these different flavors that are coming from the geology of that area where the spring is from. And so the things that you're getting are going to be minerals like calcium, magnesium, potassium, iron, and zinc. And these are things that you also get in other foods that you eat. So they're not bad for you to be consuming at all, right? Like you get potassium from bananas, you get iron from broccoli, you know, these sorts of things, they already exist in other foods that you're eating. And so when you're drinking different spring waters, you're getting different amounts of those types of minerals. And so that's what's affecting the flavor. And depending on literally your biology and your taste buds, you're going to pick up some of these flavors. And so they're going to taste sweeter or more bitter or more salty. Yeah, depending on how your taste buds react to these different minerals that are found in the water.
Or metallic.
It's just what's going to like be appealing to you.
Right.
Because of being used to tap water and because of being used to purified water, a lot of times we get a feeling that water should not have a flavor.
Right, like it should be neutral or something.
Yeah.
Like it should taste as little as possible. Which then what does it taste like? Like just cold liquid?
Yeah. I don't know.
It has to have some taste.
Because we've stripped all the minerals out of it.
Yes,
so
right.
Therefore,
so all of the natural
it has no taste.
Is gone.
Exactly.
Right. Makes sense. It makes total sense.
Makes total sense. So I guess what this all comes down to for me is that I definitely feel that there's a reason why I like some brands of water better than others. Because if you're buying the spring water from a bottle, then it does taste different than other spring waters and definitely different than a purified or filtered water.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
I used to think that like, okay, water is water, whatever. Mm-hmm. Until we started talking about all of this, and then I kind of started actually paying attention to what the different ones taste like. And I agree. I think the biggest distinction is between the purified water versus a natural mineral water that comes from a spring. And I think the taste is better.
In fairness, though, now that we've been having this conversation for several years, I actively try different waters.
Yes,
now.
And I pay attention to like what they taste like, and like, does this one taste any better to me? Or because also some of them have higher price tags too. So I'm like, well, maybe it's not worth the $5 for this dumb bottle of Evian if I like the taste of something else better.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, if I'm going to be purchasing water, I do tend to purchase sparkling water. I feel like that's where I really notice a big difference between different types of sparkling water. You know, I think Mountain Valley tastes really good. Mountain Valley sparkling water, that's like a spring water Perrier, right?
Yeah.
But then I think that there's other sparkling waters that don't taste as good.
Right. So actually this is funny too, because this was also a recent conversation that we had, like maybe the last time I came to visit you, because you were talking about how you like the sparkling waters, and I'm like, oh God, I hate seltzers, I hate sparkling water, I think it's gross. And I think you were like, well, have you tried different kinds? And I think you're the one who told me about maybe San Pellegrino, or you were like, just try a different one. And I tried that, and I was like, oh, this actually tastes a lot different. And then come to find out, a lot of sparkling waters are just purified water.
Yeah.
That they have
that they put carbonation in.
Instead of an actual mineral water or a spring water that has a natural flavor to it that then they add carbonation to.
Yes. Because if you pay attention to sparkling waters, there's different types of carbonation in them. Like the carbonation feels different. There's some sparkling waters that have like small, like fizzy bubbles, and then there's some that have bigger bubbles, and some that are more carbonated or less carbonated.
Yes.
And again, it has to do with just the process of whether or not they're using a naturally occurring fizzy spring water, right? Or if they're putting carbonation into purified water, or if they're putting carbonation into a spring water, just how they're choosing to do that.
Right. And I will say, so I have been actively trying more sparkling waters, but I always check the label first to make sure it's like a mineral water or spring water, because all of the ones that I have tasted that are purified waters, just like, no, doesn't do it for me. Like, I'd rather just have a pop at that point.
That's fair. Well, something that might help you to pick a delicious tasting bottled water is knowing that there is an international water tasting competition that is held in West Virginia
West
every
Virginia?
year. Yes. So it's
Okay.
held in a town called Berkeley Springs in West Virginia, and it is the largest and longest running water tasting competition in the world. It just had its
Really?
34th year.
Okay.
Yep, it just had its 34th year in February 2004. And they judge water from all over the world, and they have several different categories. So they have a category that's best municipal water. So they will just judge the taste and flavor of general tap water that is filtered and sent to people's homes. They have a category for best non-carbonated bottled water, and that's going to be the spring waters. So that's going to be that category, is non-carbonated water is the spring water. They have a category for best sparkling water, and they have a category for best purified drinking water. So the best non-carbonated one is going to be the spring water, and then the best purified drinking water, that's going to be bottled water that's just a purified
I'd
water.
be so mad if Dasani won.
No. I went back. I went through the whole list of all of the winners from every year that the competition has existed. It's on their website because I was so curious, and I was like, wait, I need to know all the... What was crazy is I found out that Kent, Ohio, where I lived in Ohio, had the best municipal water for like 8 years.
Really?
Yes. No wonder I was drinking tap water. It was great, apparently.
And
it was the best water ever.
Okay. I would have guessed somewhere in like Tennessee or Kentucky because of all the limestone.
Yeah. So this year, the best municipal water, first place was Santa Ana, California. But there's some interesting ones on here, I think. Second place, the village of Montpelier, Ohio.
Okay.
Third place was Emporia, Kansas, which
interesting.
Is close to where I lived in Kansas. Fourth was Dickinson, North Dakota, and then fifth was Harpers Ferry, West Virginia.
Okay. Interesting.
For municipal water flavor. I know. So, you think it might be, they were like, oh, California, but no, like there's some North Dakota, Kansas, West Virginia.
I suppose the geologic profile must have something to do with that.
Best non-carbonated water, these are spring waters. El Dorado, natural spring water from El Dorado Springs, Colorado. Okay. So that was like we said, Arrowhead is from Colorado. So let's see. Second place, Piney Plains natural spring water from Little Orleans, Maryland. Third place was from Australia, Peninsula Springs spring water from Doveton, Victoria, Australia.
Okay.
Fourth place was from Canada, New Brunswick, Yano water from New Brunswick, Canada. Fifth was from Greece, Sioni natural mineral water from Greece.
Interesting. Okay.
So these are like, they're definitely not ones that you've probably heard of. To be fair.
Yeah, they're much more niche.
Yeah.
Or very specific.
Like, do you think Dasani's entering the taste contest?
That's a good question. I mean,
I don't know.
They're selling a lot of water.
They
don't need publicity.
Yeah, they don't need the marketing.
They apparently have lots of loyal followers, I guess. I don't know. Dasani's definitely not a sponsor, by the way.
Hashtag not sponsored.
Yeah.
Since there's all this like conversation about different tastes of water and how all these waters can taste different depending on where they're coming from, there are now such a thing as water sommeliers.
Oh, yes. Yes. I had no idea that we get, I mean, I guess it doesn't surprise me. We come up with this shit all the time, but like someone just like a wine sommelier who literally is just an expert at water tasting.
Yeah. And so restaurants are creating curated water menus. Have you seen this?
Yes, to go with like the meals, like to pair with the meal appropriately.
They'll hire a water sommelier to create their water offering menu that has a whole list of different waters to pair with the food that's being offered in the restaurant.
Yeah, I wonder if they come with ice. Probably not. I probably wouldn't like it. I probably wouldn't like any
ice
of them.
Would probably ruin the integrity of the water, right?
But, it's one of my biggest pet peeves, going to a freaking fancy restaurant and they bring out a bottle of water to your table and 2 glasses and no ice. I'm just like, this is
I'd probably
terrible.
like it.
Yeah. Sometimes I know you would. And apparently everybody else does because no one else complains about it except me. But I always get so annoyed. If it comes out chilled.
Don't go to Europe.
I know. That was also, I know. USA, ice. But no, sometimes it comes out chilled, but then it doesn't stay chilled for very long. And I don't know. But I agree. They probably do it because they're bringing you a fancy bottle of water and it tastes a certain way. And they don't want to put just regular old tap water ice cubes into your bougie water.
Unless you're just buying a purified water, then it doesn't matter. It's the same water.
Right.
The ice and the bottled water.
That's right.
It is the same.
So I also stumbled across in this water research, since we were talking about all of the different flavors and things, a product that they're selling now as well called Third Wave Water. And this is just the one I stumbled across. So I don't know if there are other brands as well, but they're selling packets of minerals to add to your water to improve the taste of your coffee specifically. So they have, I know, I kind of want to try this now. So now that I have my reverse osmosis water, I can just add minerals back into it.
Just put back in the things that the filter took out.
Yes, exactly. So, but yeah, so they have a dark roast, a light roast, and a medium roast profile. So they put different balances of minerals in them based on what they recommend for the type of coffee. And I mean, so this kind of surprised me, but I guess it shouldn't, because coffee can be very acidic and bitter and things like that. And so the type of water that you brew it in probably affects all of those tasting notes.
I feel like a lot of times when you buy a coffee maker, right? We have a Ninja coffee maker. It'll say specifically, make sure you use purified water.
Yes.
And I'm sure that has to do with, like you were saying, sometimes harder water gunks up the system and stuff. But you're also using water that has had all of these minerals and other flavor agents removed from it.
Right.
Which would affect the coffee. And especially since coffee is already a little acidic, you might want something to balance out the acidity of the coffee.
I know. I was like, how clever. I wouldn't have even thought about that.
Interesting.
I mean, because I'll drink coffee even if it tastes like crap, to be honest. That's how much I need my coffee in the morning. I don't care that much.
I'm definitely not a coffee sommelier.
Yes.
Absolutely not.
No, me either. But yeah, so they have these little single-use packets, or that you can add to your, if you're doing a pour-over coffee or whatever, and you want to create so who knew? So read your labels, people. Like I said, spring water is delicious. I'm not a big fan.
Is delicious.
Of Dasani.
Agreed.
We learned several times.
Also just the cost margin, if you think about it.
Oh, right.
When water comes in a plastic bottle, plastic is cheap, unfortunately. And so these manufacturers are just taking these cheap plastic bottles and putting filtered water in it and then selling it to you for $1.50, $2 a bottle. And they're just racking in crazy amounts of profit on that water that you could just get out of your tap.
Right. And if you love Dasani, sorry. But just some food for thought. Maybe try an ice.
But I do feel
like
it does make it so that if you want to buy mineral water, there is actually a reason.
Yes.
That you're buying.
I agree.
Water.
And also not to diminish the fact that there are definitely places where it might be harder to get potable water. And so purified drinking water makes sense to purchase. Yes. And so we get that too. But just in general, what's largely sold for the sake of convenience is not really worth your money in our humble
marketed
opinion.
As like a healthy alternative.
And it's funny you mentioned the plastic. That also made me think something that I've noticed in the last few years, this trend of the canned water. I've been to some events and I started seeing people carrying around these like tall boy cans, and I was thinking it was like some beer I hadn't heard of or some kind of cocktail I hadn't heard of. And I asked someone what it was, and they're like, oh, it's just water. And I was like, oh, well, that is smart, right? So it's fascinating to me that the newest wave of marketing for a packaged water, because it's not technically bottled, but it's canned, right, is that they've taken it and put it in a can that kind of looks like an alcoholic beverage, or could be, but is more recyclable or more easy to like recycle, or can be made with recycled materials. And then they branded it in a way. So I'm talking about Liquid Death, if you haven't figured this out, but they branded it in like a humorous way with like kind of edgy artwork and things like this. And people freaking love it. Now, like I see them at concerts and stuff all the time. I've purchased them many times because it's, I don't know, one, a lot of times the bottled water that you get at an event venue sucks. Like it's just the purified crappy water.
And at an event, you're not allowed to bring in your own bottle.
Right. So then you're like pigeonholed into buying whatever water they offer. And I do think the Liquid Death tastes superior because it is spring water. It's not purified water. It does come. Now, they originally marketed it as coming from the Austrian Alps, but I just read that they have changed that because obviously I'm thinking it got pretty expensive and maybe not so efficient to ship a bunch of water over just to can it and sell it. But I think they started sourcing from like West Virginia or something like that instead for the U.S. market.
Well, West Virginia has great.
I know. When you said that, I was like, oh, I wonder if that's why they chose that location. Maybe they have maybe they went around and tasted all the waters and they were like, this is the one we'll sell.
I don't know. I did also just buy, I was at Beer Garden and they had the sparkling liquid.
Yeah, I like their sparkling one too.
I just got one of those the other day.
Yeah.
So I was like, you know what? It's 95 degrees outside.
Yeah.
I should have some water.
Right. Yes. Yep. So yeah, and I appreciate, I don't know, I also think it tastes a little better when it's in the can versus a plastic bottle. So even, I don't know if just like the metallic taste or something, I enjoy that.
Glass bottle, superior taste.
Yeah.
Then can. Yeah. Then plastic at the bottom.
Yep.
Plastic just doesn't, stuff out of plastic doesn't taste good.
Yeah, I agree. So, I think probably the most surprising thing to me is that I never really thought about the fact that when you're buying purified water, they're literally using the water that is available to you in that same area, but just doing some added purification. Like, I really didn't think about that.
The water that you're paying for.
Yeah. So I just think, like, it's one of those things that, like, on the surface, right, it's very easy to just, like, kind of go with the marketing, you know, or, like, whatever the label says, you know, this one has added electrolytes or blah, blah. But when it comes down to it, it's really just potable water that was already available to us in most places, right? Like I said, I know that there are places where it might be more difficult, but...
in the U.S., we can caveat that. Yeah. I think for me, some of the stuff that stood out was just how the bottled water industry started as a spring water industry for health purposes. Right. And so it makes sense that we might continue to purchase a bottled spring water.
Right.
Because of that, like, mineral content that exists, which of course does add to the flavor. And you know, the sommelier thing I think is kind of funny, but I guess I get it, you know, like, as I talk about how they taste different to me. So I thought that was interesting to learn sort of that history.
Yeah, something I also didn't really think about, like, that there was a time, that the spring water industry was so old and the purified water industry is so new in comparison.
Yes. And then they all get lumped together as the same sort of bottled water industry, when realistically they have different functions and histories and purposes.
And tastes. Most importantly, tastes.
Thank you for listening to Researching the Obvious. To learn more fun facts about everything that we're researching, follow us on Instagram at Researching the Obvious Pod, all one word. You can also follow us on Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you know someone that you think would enjoy listening to all of our findings, please feel free to share or give us a review. Researching the Obvious is written, produced, edited, and hosted by Emily Fekete and Katie Nakanishi. Tune in next time to hear more obvious facts.